Before we get started, I have a little bit of business to take care of up front. Those of you who have watched my movie reviews in the past may remember that occasionally I have guzzled a glass of beer in preparation for reviewing a bad movie. Well, I would like to break that custom for this review, because this glass of beer here is not intended as fortification while I discuss a bad movie, but rather it is a toast to J.J. Abrams, to Lawrence Kasdan, to the cast and crew of Star Wars The Force Awakens, which I thought was a damn good movie. Here's to you, everybody. Whew. It's been a while since I did that. So, what better excuse for departing from my personal precedent and drinking a beer at the beginning of a positive movie review than a review of this movie, which breaks with recent precedent by being a Star Wars movie that is not boring and plot heavy and dull, that is not two-dimensional, but is fun and exciting and accessible and filled with interesting, likable characters, heroes and villains, and just a complete departure from the Star Wars prequels. This review will not be spoilers, by the way. I'm going to discuss things that are in the movie. I will be talking about things that are either present in the film or that happen in the film, but I am not going to be revealing any of the things that are treated as mysteries in the movie. There are 2 or 3 moments in the film that are really big reveals or big surprises that are significant to the plot that you would not know going into the movie unless you had sought out spoilers. So I'm not going to spoil any of the surprises or the mysteries or whatever in the movie for you. But I am going to talk about a few things that are in the movie that maybe weren't necessarily in the previews. So if you're coming into this having not seen the movie and you don't want to know anything about it, then stop watching this review. But if you're just worried about avoiding the major plot spoilers, I'm not going to be talking about plot spoilers in this review. So, having said that, the movie begins on a really, really wonderful note. I think maybe one of the best shots, or maybe even the best shot of this entire movie, and this is a beautifully shot movie. Maybe the best shot is the first shot, when we get the typical opening, the Star Wars words blasting into the screen, right? And the opening crawl, we get all of the usual stuff, and then there's the expected pan down from the star field to a planet, and we get this really beautiful simultaneous recreation and reinvention of the first shot of Star Wars, of the first movie, where of course that they had that famous first shot where the rebel ship, the tiny little rebel ship, is fleeing from the humongous Imperial ship that just seems to go on forever, flying over the camera. We get a version of that as the first shot of this movie, but instead of instead of having it from a perspective of looking up at the ship as it flies past us, we see the shadow of the ship fall over the planet below. And it is such a stunning shot, and it is just such a beautiful way of both referencing that original opening shot from Star Wars and also coming up with a twist on it, doing it in a new way. And Abrams, as a director, I think is really good at that. J.J. Abrams gets a really bad rap from people, in my opinion, of being too referencey or too calculated, and making too many obvious references. And some of those criticisms are fair. I mean, as much as I liked Star Wars or Star Trek Into Darkness, I do think people had a point about some of the very obvious allusions and inversions of things from like Star Trek II that were in that movie. People who complain about that, I understand where they're coming from with that, and Abrams, I think, is guilty in that case. But in this movie, even though there are a lot of references to other Star Wars films, especially the first one, which I refuse to call A New Hope, even after all these years. I call it Star Wars. That's the name of the movie. It makes many references to that movie and to some of the other Star Wars films, but it usually does it in a way that is not so obvious and so on the nose that it becomes distracting or irritating, or it feels like this movie is just repeating itself. And I know not everybody agrees with me on that. I've read reviews and talked to people who have seen the film who say, The Force Awakens it feels too much like the original Star Wars. It repeats too many of the plot points. It's too similar in the arc of its story, and I didn't feel that when I was watching it. There are obviously some similarities in the terms of the journeys of the characters, and things that happen in certain scenes are staged in ways that are very reminiscent of scenes in the original Star Wars. I understand what they're saying, but when I'm sitting in the theater watching the movie, I'm not thinking about any of that. The movie is pulling me along and keeping me interested in what's happening, and allowing me to invest in the characters. And I'm not really sitting there, this is just me talking, I'm not really sitting there going, oh, that reminds me of Star Wars, and that reminds me of Star Wars, and that's just like in the Star Wars. I don't get that. I feel like I'm interested in what's going on the screen in front of me. When this movie starts, it starts and it just goes. The pacing is so different from the prequels, and it's even a little bit quicker than the original trilogy. The original Star Wars films, the original three, they were pretty quick. They were pretty tight. They moved along at a pretty good clip. But this movie moves even quicker, I think, and takes even less time to slow down and catch its breath. And I think in this case that works really well. It really comes across as a pulp space adventure. And that to me is when Star Wars is at its best. When it gets bogged down in galactic politics, or for me, even when it spends too much time waxing poetic about the Force and all the Jedi quasi-religious stuff. Like, I mean, there's a certain beauty to some of that, but when it spends too much time on that, I just start to go, like, okay, what's going to happen next? What next? And this movie really strikes an excellent balance between playing up the Star Wars mythology and referencing parts of the Star Wars story world that people really love, like the Force, like the dark side versus the light side. But it spends most of its time telling its story, propelling its characters forward, and I just think someone asked me on Twitter after I said I had seen it, and I said I really liked it. Someone asked me, where would you rank this among the other Star Wars films? And I said I would probably, at this point, having only seen it once, but having a pretty good impression of it, I think, I would rank it third after Empire and after Star Wars. I think it's that good. I think it's better than Return of the Jedi. I think it's far better than any of the prequels. And one of the main reasons why it is so good and why it feels so satisfying is that in addition to bringing back the classic Star Wars characters, everybody knows Han Solo is in this movie, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia is in this movie, the original droids, C-3PO and R2-D2 are in this movie. Chewie is in the movie. You know, there's a lot of returning favorites from the original trilogy, but the movie's not about them. They play really important roles, and they have really interesting and important things to do. They're not just there for cameos. They're not just there to sort of wave to the fans in the theater and go, "Hi, look, are you happy now? Han Solo's back. You know, Princess Leia's back. Hi." They have really important things to do in the movie, but this movie is not about them. This movie is about the new characters, the fresh characters, the characters that presumably are going to be carrying the rest of this new trilogy. And the movie really scores with these guys. The movie really creates interesting characters and has cast wonderful young actors to play them. Daisy Ridley as Rey, who is basically the lead in this, or at least the co-lead, is just fantastic. I love her character. I love her performance. She's a classic adventure story protagonist. You know, she sort of gets caught up in this adventure. There's also Finn. He begins the movie as a stormtrooper, and then he leaves the stormtrooper corps. He leaves what the First Order, which is sort of the successor to the Empire. And Finn spends much of the movie running, but crucially, he's not running because he's a coward. He is afraid. He's afraid that the First Order is going to catch him and find him and kill all of his new friends. He's very afraid of that, but he's not afraid because he's a coward. he doesn't leave the Empire or the First Order and begin to run because he's a coward. He runs because he doesn't want to be one of these people. The actor who plays him, John Boyega, is just fantastic. Just an incredibly likable, charismatic actor. The kind of person that I could definitely see following through 2 more movies, much as people felt about Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy. I feel the same way about John Boyega and about Daisy Ridley and her character of Rey. The other major new characters, there's Kylo Ren, who is the villain, who has an interesting backstory that I won't go into because I think that's getting into spoiler territory, but he's a really fascinating villain, turns out to be a multi-layered villain, a potentially tragic villain, so he's very interesting. He's not just a bad guy with a lightsaber and a black mask and a black cloak. He's a very, very interesting character and has a lot of potential there to be developed into a really great character. Not just a great villain, not just a great foil for the heroes, not just a threatening force, but actually a really, really terrific character in his own right. And crucially, when he takes off the helmet, which he does at one point in the film, it does not destroy the character, it does not destroy the mystique of the character. When you see the face behind the mask, it only adds to the depth and to the fascination of the character. It doesn't destroy it at all. He's more than just a scary costume, which is really nice to see. And it's really nice to see that the filmmakers even attempted that, even bothered to make him into a more well-rounded character. Oscar Isaacs is here as Poe Dameron, who has been described as like a swashbuckling pulp hero, which is just right. He's terrific. The sort of a reminiscent of Han Solo, but then again, a little bit more proactive, a little bit less jaded than Han. Very, very, very smart and very sort of world-weary and hip to the way things work in the galaxy, but not as reluctant to be a good guy as Han was in the earlier films. So just really, really terrific work from him. By the way, Adam Driver is the actor who plays Kylo Ren. I didn't want to get too far away from that without mentioning his name as well. Great performances from all of the new cast. Great job from J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan, who is the primary screenwriter of this, along with Abrams, in creating these characters and in building this story, which is a very simple story, a very direct story, a story that in its broad arc is not terribly unpredictable, although there are some surprising things that happen in it. There are some plot twists that occur here and there. And some surprising revelations, but overall the story itself is not that surprising or unpredictable. And some of the most satisfying moments in the movie are moments that once you pay attention to the story, you kind of come to expect. There are 2 fantastically satisfying moments near the end of this movie. One involving Finn, the other involving Daisy, both involving a lightsaber. And sort of big moments for both of these characters, and these moments happen pretty quick, one after the other, and neither one of them is unforeseen, neither one of them is surprising. They have been built up to, and the movie has been leading up to both of these big moments, but they are both so incredibly satisfying, and the fact that they have been built up to and that you have been led to expect them, and that they're not treated as like big surprises, is what makes them such wonderfully satisfying moments. So I don't know what else I can say about it. It's a terrific movie, a really enjoyable, fun fantasy space adventure movie. If you come looking for some nostalgia and a sort of a revisitation with your classic favorite Star Wars characters, if you just want to see the Millennium Falcon again, you will be satisfied, I think. The Millennium Falcon is in this fucking thing a lot, and it's really cool, and it's really great to see. There's a lot of classic Star Wars stuff. You get to see the TIE fighters and the X-Wings and at least the image of the classic Rebel versus Empire struggle, even though they're not really called that anymore. It's the First Order and the Resistance, but it's the same sort of thing. And it's just, if that's what you're after, just sort of a dose of old school Star Wars, I think you'll be very happy. And if you're coming for the new stuff, for the new characters, to see the revitalized franchise and see where it's going to be going from here, I think you'll be very happy and very optimistic about what you see. It's just a really, really great movie. If you're a fan of Star Wars, if you've been a fan of Star Wars for a long time, if you were disillusioned by the prequels or felt like the franchise had lost its way or become too dull and preoccupied with its own quasi-mysticism and had sort of, been too up its own ass in terms of the mythology and the saga, and also began to feel more and more like just a sizzle reel for special effects. All of those concerns for me were completely absent in this movie. The Force Awakens is not that kind of a movie at all. It is a rousing, crowd-pleasing space adventure with some really wonderfully powerful emotional moments, and just a movie that I think most of you, if you're a Star Wars person or you're thinking about becoming a Star Wars person, will be able to really enjoy. I highly, highly recommend Star Wars The Force Awakens, and I'm so happy that I can say that. Can I tell you something? About 3/4 of the way through, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish that. Hey everybody, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it and share it and subscribe to my channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/SteveShives to become a patron. And now, because this is a Star Wars video, I apologize, but I really have to say this. May the Force be with you.